Okay, so good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. We are here on case number 25.86, which is the Commission's investigation into certain nuclear issues pursuant to Senate Joint Resolution 140 from the 2024 legislative session. My name is Jeb Penny. I'm an executive advisor to the Public Service Commission. I'll be running this rodeo today. To my left is Ashley Hatcher, staff attorney. We have several other members of staff and a nuclear working group with us. I want to welcome everybody who is here in person and also those with us online. Now I will turn this over to the chair.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate your participation. Looking forward to a good discussion. I think it'd be really nice if we introduced ourselves, just in case. I mean, most of us are the usual suspects and we kind of know each other, but I'm Chair Angie Hatton. And with me is Commissioner Wood. If anybody has not met our newest Commissioner, Andrew Wood, he's here with me today. Commissioner Regan is off this week. She had a family wedding in Minnesota, so we won't have her all week, but I know she will review the video later. We'll post it. And Tripp Costin is our Director of Financial Analysis. John Rognus has been here for a very long time. Probably most of you guys know he's been here forever through a couple of decades of administration here in Frankfort and outlasted us all in financial analysis. Kenya, of course, everybody knows Kenya Stump and Brittany Cave, who came over from the cabinet, said they've been part of our nuclear work group and very, very helpful to us as we get started. And then maybe start here and just kind of say your name and who you're with, I think would be useful.
My name is Ken Shapiro. I'm on the board of directors of the Louisville Climate Action Network. I'm the secretary of the organization, and my portfolio is with LCAN is basically government affairs and public policy.
I'm David Brown-Kinlock. I'm a consultant working with local Climate Action Network.
Good morning, David Spinard, Struggle Barclay. We represent Louisville Climate Action Network.
Good morning, Timothy Mayer, same, Strobo Barkley, representing LCAN.
Audrey Ernstberger, an attorney with Kentucky Resources Council, and here representing Kentucky Resources Council.
Rocco D'Ascenzo, attorney for Duke Energy Kentucky.
Sarah Lawler, I lead the Rates and Regulatory Group for Duke Energy in Kentucky.
Tom Kelly, President and CEO of Big Rivers Electric.
Tyson Kamoff, I'm General Counsel for Big Rivers Electric.
Cynthia Santana, Associate Attorney for Big Rivers Electric.
John Moore with the Attorney General's Office.
Mike West, Attorney General's Office.
Allison Honaker, Honaker Law Office, here on behalf of EKPC.
Greg Cecil with EKPC, and I am our regulatory and rates.
Julie Tucker with East Kentucky Power.
And Don Moser, Chief Operating Officer, East Kentucky.
Rick Lefkamp with LG&KU and our State Regulation and Rates Group.
Duncan Crosby, Stolkien and Ogden on behalf of LG&KU.
Mike Seaborn, I'm the Director of Energy Planning with LG&KU.
Jeffrey Nickum, Vice President, Regulatory and Finance for Kentucky Power.
Ken Gish, Tyson Hardison for Kentucky Power.
Harley Havens, Stites Hardison for Kentucky Power.
Good morning, I'm Shane Lease. I'm with American Electric Power, the Executive Vice President over nuclear development, and the 28 years prior to that I spent at AEP's Cook Nuclear Plant in Michigan.
And welcome. Nice to have you and everybody. Do we have some folks online, Jeb?
We have plenty.
I don't know what is the very best way to do introductions online other than, what do you think? Just have people pop in?
Well, why don't we go through, is there anybody online from LCAN? Mr. Spinard, do you know?
No, I do not believe so.
All right. Ms. Erzberg, anybody from Kentucky Resources Council online?
Not that I'm aware.
Okay. Rocco, anybody from Duke?
Yes, there should be, I believe, 3 people.
If they can make their introductions, we'd appreciate it.
This is Angela Burkhart. I'm with Duke Energy, and I'm the Engineering Director for New Nuclear.
This is Larissa Vaisman. I am with Duke Energy, and I'm Regulatory Counsel.
is Mina Sunderman. I am a senior paralegal with Duke Energy Kentucky.
And Maeve Mason, Utility Strategy Director, Duke Energy, Ohio and Kentucky.
Mr. DiCenso, did you submit these names before the people who are participating?
All but Maeve Mason. She was
Okay.
on our original list.
Okay, all right. Mr. Moser, is there anybody from Big Rivers?
I believe Selena Matthews may be on.
Okay.
Helena Matthews, Big Rivers.
All right, moving right from my right to the left. Anybody from the Attorney General's office?
No.
Anybody from East Kentucky Power?
I don't believe so.
Anybody from LG&E and KU?
Aaron Patrick may be on it,
Oh,
yes.
Power.
I think there might be some, Mr. Cave or Ms. Cave from EKPC.
Yes, it's Meredith Cave for EKPC.
Meredith Cave, okay. That's for your office, Ms. Honaker. Okay. All right, and I'm sorry, Mr. Lovekamp, who?
Aaron Patrick may be joining us in virtual.
Okay.
And before we go much further, I see that Senator Carroll has joined us. And since, before you get too comfortable, Senator Carroll, since we're all here at your behest, based on your SJR 140, which instructed us all to get ready to regulate nuclear, would you like to say a few words before we get started? We're just in the introductions phase.
Really put me on the spot.
Sorry.
Thank you all for being here. And I cannot tell you how excited I am for what's going on in Kentucky in relation to nuclear energy. You all know several years ago, 2017, we lifted the moratorium. Really not much happened after that. But when things did start happening, it started happening at lightning speed. And you know, it's important for us to make sure that we keep up with the other states. Forgive me, I got to catch my breath a little bit. And with Health Public Service Commission, Kenya, Secretary Goodwin from the Cabinet, everybody's been working together, and that's refreshing to see in Frankfurt. It doesn't happen very often. And because of that, we have really made progress quickly. And it's important that we build on that momentum. You all know the things that are happening down in Paducah in my part of the state, so we're really getting a jump start in the area of fuel as far as nuclear energy. So I'm here to support and do whatever I can do with these efforts and just be an asset. And Kenya, I can't thank you enough for the leadership that you've provided in the state, in this area. And again, it's just exciting times for our Commonwealth, and it's very necessary. And if we do not get ahead of this, we're going to fall behind on energy in our Commonwealth, and it's going to affect our economy. It's going to affect our growth, business and industry within the state. And so it's crucial that we get moving on this. And Angie, you all are doing a great job, and you're going above and beyond what was asked of you. And I appreciate that more than you know. And your area is crucial to our efforts as we move forward in getting everything in line so we can move forward. It's just a key element of everything that we do. And I will stop there. Thank you all.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Senator, for coming by. This might last for hours today. Stay as long as you can, and as we know your time is valuable. We're introducing ourselves. We have, I think, every utility and co-op is represented, as well as a number of environmental groups, and then our staff. And then we were just in the middle of introducing the rest of the folks who are online. Jeb Penny is leading us today. He looks very comfortable in my chair.
I had to raise it.
The chair is short.
I think I left off with Kentucky Power. Do you all have anybody that's online?
We do. Noelle jumped on first. Let her go first.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Noelle Coates. I'm regulatory counsel with AEP. I work in our new state regulatory proceedings involving new generation. So I'm working on 2 right now with SMRs specifically. So nice to meet everyone.
And my name is Juan Dawson with Stuyton Harbison on behalf of Kentucky Power.
Morning, Your Honors, and everybody else. Thank you for having us on here. I'm Mike Schuler. I'm Assistant General Counsel representing Kentucky Power.
Is that it for you, Mr. Gish?
Yes.
Okay. And then we have several members of staff online. Chair, would you like for them to introduce themselves?
Sure.
Brian Thomas, General Counsel of PSC.
Jurgen Salem, one of the staff attorneys for the PSC.
Okay, so.
Hi, Sherry Mayhand, Public Information Officer, PSC.
I also see we have John West, who's with the Office of General Counsel, and Jessica Norris Canfield, also another attorney on our staff. That might be it. Have we gotten to everybody, Jeff?
I think so. If anybody hasn't introduced themselves in person or online, especially online, please go ahead and identify yourselves. I do want to point out that one member of staff joined us, Justin McNeil, in the far back corner. He is the other executive advisor of the Public Service Commission. Okay. Yeah. Are we ready to proceed, Chair?
Yeah, let's go.
Thank you very much. All right, so once again, I'm Jim Penny, Executive Advisor to the Public Service Commission. I don't think many people have participated, that are in this room have participated in a poll attachment rulemaking that we have done, but the way we have approached it is similar to the way that we have set up this hearing room, where we bring up topics and then representatives from the interested parties will sit at council table and can respond to the different topics or say their piece and respond to what else has been said. When I walked in here yesterday, I swear we did not have a second table, but now we seem to have some additional space. And so, by my count, we have several of the utilities represented, and then we have both Kentucky Resources Council and LCAN here, and the Attorney General's office. So, I want to figure out if we have enough space so the representatives that want to speak can sit at council table, and that way they do not have to shuffle back and forth. If you have one representative from a utility, that would be beneficial, but if not, then we can kind of move back and forth. So let's take about 2 minutes to see if people want to move forward, find their spot here, and then we can take it from there. I'm sorry, it's a little bit of a cattle call, but this is the way we're going to have to manage to do things. Okay, that went better than I expected. Thank you all very much for that. And if at any time somebody else wants to come up and speak, please do. We do have some extra spaces here, and you can make yourself known, and we can make accommodations for the fact. I know, at least in some of the proceedings here, we pose questions that sometimes the people who are at council table or in the witness stand are not the ones to respond, so we can always bring somebody forward again. Is everybody familiar with, I think, the August 1st order that the commission put out? It has a list of topics that we can discuss. I'm going to use that as a general framework to address the initial issues to discuss. But this can be a wide-ranging conversation, and I know that we'll touch on several different topics. And so, unless we get far afield, I will not endeavor to rein anybody in. We've already discussed Senate Joint Resolution 140, so we'll move on to the next one, where I think the commission instructed attendees to be prepared to discuss amending the administrative regulations to require the electric utilities consider the cost and benefits of all generation resources including but not limited to nuclear power generation resources when determining how to meet future demand as part of the triennial integrated resource plans required to file with the commission. Okay, I'm going to start in the very far back left. I'm sorry I'll skip next time and start somewhere else. But Mr. Moser, do you want to speak to that?
Hey, Jeff, do we need to do anything with the microphones? Or
Yeah, you probably need to tap it, making sure it's green. I don't know if you have to hold it. Is red on? Oh, red is on.
When the mic is red, it's active.
So I've been muting myself the entire time. It's my first time in a new hearing room. It's been done. So you learn something new every day at the commission, even in my quarter century here. All right, so we'll start over.
Well, that concludes my official remarks.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Don Moser again, East Kentucky Power. Just by way of historical background, I spent my first 15 years in this business in the nuclear power area. I started with Bechtel Power Corporation in San Francisco. I worked on probably a dozen nuclear plants in the United States in terms of engineering, design, construction, and operation. The last operating plant I worked at was at Brunswick Nuclear Power Plant in North Carolina for now Duke Energy. I'm a big proponent of nuclear power, but I'm also a big proponent of the all the above strategy as far as being able to make sure that Kentucky remains an economically viable place for companies and people who want to come and work and enjoy low electric rates and high reliability. So that's still the mantra. I would say that East Kentucky Power is on the periphery, but a foot inside the fence on nuclear power. We're sort of in a wait and see. We want to see a technology direction be adopted. We also want to see all the sausage making around how we migrate the Public Service Commission from a least cost point of view as far as rate recovery goes to I would say loosely a best value approach. We have to take a completely different look at nuclear power because clearly it's not least cost. Today it's about 10 times the cost of a combined cycle natural gas power plant. However, you have to look at all of the benefits long term. These are 60 to 80 year investments. So I think we need to look at that kind of a long-term investment recovery period. It's also for some entities, it's a bet the company decision. And for East Kentucky Power and the cooperatives in the state of Kentucky, clearly that is something that we have to be keenly aware of. Once you make the decision to move forward with nuclear power, it costs millions, and then tens of millions, and then hundreds of millions, and then $1 billion+ to move down that pike. So we need a sort of a staged recovery and ability to recover these expenses throughout the process, not just a one-time approval and then just start accumulating. We have to have a quick rate recovery. We also have to have the ability to finance these projects. So that's critical. We need a supportive regulatory framework to help encourage companies like East Kentucky Power, not just the big entities, but East Kentucky Power and the smaller entities to be able to dive into this. We view at East Kentucky Power this as more of a partnership opportunity rather than a singular approach to investing in nuclear power. We don't want to go it alone. We want to go with somebody who's an interested partner who shares our same enthusiasm for this, and we are very enthusiastic about nuclear power. We see nuclear power, if you truly believe that greenhouse gas emissions need to be reduced, we've ignored nuclear power for far too long. And we understand the bad press around nuclear power. I've lived it personally in my life. I've been involved with 3 Mile Island and other issues that have given public concern, but I would say that those concerns are way overblown. Nuclear power is extremely safe today, especially the new reactor designs, which we are very encouraged by and look forward to being a part of. But going back to the beginning, this is a matter of being able to make a least cost pathway, or get the least cost pathway obstacle removed. It has to be more of a long-term best value point of view as far as this extreme investment that companies like us would have to make in this regard. So we need a lot of regulatory support. We also need some federal support. This has to be a state, federal, and public utility or electric utility partnership to make this happen. And as far as how to make this happen at the nuts and bolts level, I'll leave that to the sausage makers. But we're very encouraged by this. I'm a part of the Kentucky Advisory Board, nuclear power, very excited to be a part of that. East Kentucky Power is supportive, very supportive of nuclear in Kentucky. We think that's the right pathway to be on, but we also are an all of the above state. So that'll conclude my opening remarks.
Thank you. Mr. Gish, Kentucky Power.
Thanks, Jeb. Before we turn it over to Shane to talk a little bit more about AP's view of nuclear power, and I think I'll speak for him, the excitement they have for the new technologies out there. I would like to echo a comment about safety as someone who was a poli-sci major who then was trained quickly to operate a nuclear power plant safely. It could be done. So I will turn it over to Shane to talk about AP's efforts and where they're at and where they're looking to go on the nuclear front.
Yeah, good morning, and I echo a lot of your comments. Thank you for those. And then just a little bit deeper introduction of myself. Again, 28 years at Cook Nuclear Plant. I started out in engineering, spent the first 5 years in the engineering organization, had the opportunity to go to license class and get my operator's license, and spent a year and a half in the control room as a unit supervisor, providing daily oversight of the facility operation. Ended up spending about 6 years in operations, ending in that as operations director, and then kind of went back and forth between the engineering side of the house as engineering director, over to the operations side of the house as plant manager, engineering vice president, site vice president, and then finished up as chief nuclear officer for a couple of years, responsible for the entire operation. AEP, as Ken pointed out, is very excited about the opportunity that nuclear is presenting for us. We have stood up a nuclear development business unit within the company, and we're making good progress across our 11-state footprint. We have announced a site in Virginia, the Joshua Falls site, and we've started into the early site characterization activities so that we can complete the environmental assessment there. We have announced the site and our intent in Indiana at the Rockport site, and we're very early in the site characterization there. We have done a significant amount of work with respect to technology evaluation. There isn't going to be a single winner. There are a lot of amazing technologies. They all have the same safety benefits, and they each serve, they each have their own niche. And so we're not going to pick a single winner. We're going to listen to what our customers want, and we have customers, large-scale customers that of course are very well informed of technology and come in with their own ideas of what they're looking for. But it is our intent to move forward as quickly as we can in support of the states, in support of our customers to build new nuclear. Thank you.
Ms. Ernstberger, anything on behalf of Kentucky Resources Council?
Yes, thank you. KRC has reservations, specifically for the cost to ratepayers. With respect to nuclear generation in Kentucky, in terms of GHG emissions and costs, and we want to take a holistic view of this issue. When you look at the emissions and cost for the life cycle for nuclear fuel, for example, or what goes into the nuclear production in general, uranium enrichment, and then going into the reactor itself. The costs, as we all know, are extremely high and are often much higher than originally predicted. And so if we're looking at changing our definition or changing our understanding from the low-cost option to the best value option, any financial risk or all financial risk to the ratepayers and any language in the regulations needs to account for the financial risk to ratepayers, not only during the construction, or not only during the operation, but also construction. In terms of a comment that I heard about a new reactor design, I would just like to point out that introduces a measure of uncertainty just like the financial unknowns and the potential risk to ratepayers. I'm going to leave it at that for now, and we'll reserve the rest of my time for the other issues as they come up.
This is wide open. There's no limit on time.
Oh, it's okay.
I appreciate the concern for everybody else's time. Mr. Spinard.
Yes, good morning. This source of energy and its characteristics are significantly different. The risks are different, the costs are different, and the evidence supports that in terms of recent developments of power plants. They have different implementation risk, they have different operational risk. One of the things that we caution you about is that so much of the discussion is based upon theory and based upon hypothesis and based upon premises of things that will be solved or can be solved or will evolve over time. And that places this in such a different category than other generation facilities. Storage is a good example of something that in theory can be discussed and agreed upon, but in practice it's quite different.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. Storage of what?
Storage of the spent fuel.
Okay, just.
I apologize. I apologize.
Storage can have a different thing, and I'm sorry to interrupt you.
And storage does have different characteristics. There's the temporary storage, and then there is the permanent storage. And when we're talking about storage, I can remember attending Camp Nayrook in 1996, and someone from the NRC, who was one of their officials, a very nice person, very smart person, when we were talking at one of the breaks, told me that the storage issue would be resolved 6 months, 8 months from now. That's a perfect example of something that we have been watching for several decades now. And it's good theory and people talk about it. There was just a few weeks ago, as a matter of fact, a Supreme Court opinion, Supreme Court of the United States opinion, that was about storage. And about the temporary storage and are we going to have private storage in these spent fuels? Or are we going to allow it? Is it licensable? And I think that given these type of things, the phrase due diligence, and this is why we certainly appreciate the opportunity to provide these comments, the phrase due diligence is very appropriate, and it's not simply about thinking about whether or not in some of these instances we're putting the cart in front of the horse. In many instances with regard to this effort, there either is no cart or there is no horse. And so we, of course, urge the Commission and appreciate the opportunity to provide these comments. We urge the Commission because of the different characteristics and how this is just such a different, it is the magnitude of the complexity is much different from a rate-making standpoint, from a financial risk standpoint, from an operational risk standpoint, from a security standpoint. You have to remove so many of these contingencies and prove so many of these points, and you cannot just speculate that things will be okay. And that's one of the main things that Louisville Climate Action Network, in terms of submitting its statement of issues, is focusing upon is there are a lot of questions that have to be answered before you move down this path. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spinard. Mr. D'Ascenzo, you or anybody on your behalf?
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to come in and speak. Duke Energy Kentucky, when we submitted our list of issues, we included comments to further explain our position. And so much of what we would have to say is embedded in those comments. But I would like to focus on one issue as so eloquently stated by our friends from EKPC, the need for flexible regulatory treatment for such an investment, something that balances the need for timely recovery of this investment and smoothing those costs over time for customers. The commission has a history of using rate recovery mechanisms that allow that to happen in certain instances, and we think that that is a wonderful tool that can be used to help with those cost recovery and issues and allowing spreading those costs out over time for customers rather than all at once through base rate cases. I would like to open the floor, if I could, to Angela Burkhart, our Director of Nuclear Engineering. I know she has some comments that she would like to share as well.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to share that what Duke Energy is doing for new nuclear right now. We do have a coal site in our Carolinas jurisdiction in North Carolina. It's about 15 miles north of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and we're doing an early site permit for that location. Right now, that early site permit is agnostic. It does not specify a technology, and we're continuing to monitor all the technologies as they progress. But what this allows for us to do is to do the environmental studies, to do the core drills, and get all the site permitting ready for when we do make a technology decision. And in the Carolinas, the reason we chose that location, one is it's a coal site that we can do, it's ready to retire in the near future, so it makes for a great transition to maintain the workforce that can direct transition to the nuclear site. And then also in the Carolinas, we have 11 nuclear units that we currently own and operate. And so we have a lot of experience in the Carolinas. So we're learning through this ESP process so that we can inform our other jurisdictions.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question while you're here, and I think we've gotten a feel from the commission's changes to the IRP process. In fact, I don't think we even started on that field. But anyway, Ms. Burkhart, I do have a question. When was the last nuclear plant that Duke Energy built? When was the most recent commissioning of a nuclear power plant?
The most recent commissioning, I don't have the exact date, and I can get that for you.
It's not.
Pleasure.
Just thereabouts would be fine.
Yeah, thereabouts is in the 80s is when we commissioned McGuire and Catawba Nuclear Station, which are in the North and South Carolina areas.
Is McGuire there, bottom of the lake, at the end of the lake? Is that where McGuire is?
Yeah, McGuire is on Lake Norman,
Yeah,
north
okay.
of Charlotte.
That's what I thought. All right, thank you. Mr. Sims, anybody back from Duke Energy?
No, that's it. Thank you.
All right, move over to LG&E and KU.
Yeah, Jim, thanks, LG and KU, appreciate being a part of this. I think back to your question about the IRP. LG and KU in the 2024 IRP did evaluate nuclear generation and looked at that across many scenarios. So when we look at the IRP regulations today, I don't think there's anything that kind of constricts us from doing that. But I think if there is some things that the commission would want to amend, there are some languages that we could propose. I think it would be pretty minor that would show nuclear being in there, but not limited to from that standpoint.
Okay. All right. And do you have any other general comments since everybody else?
No, nothing that's not been said already.
Okay. Anybody else in the audience or online? Anybody from the Attorney General's office want to make a comment on this, Senator Carroll? At any point, you just raise your hand and we'll give you the mic.
Just quickly, some of the concerns that you all expressed about the technologies, it's not our intention to try to get in front of any of this. And I spend a lot of time keeping up with technology. I've visited national labs. I've seen the demonstration projects that are taking place right now. And, I think the market will thin itself out. The technologies will thin themselves out, and the cream will rise to the top. And I think we're already seeing those things underway within the country. And we will learn from what's going on in other states right now, from the tests that are underway with the different technologies that are coming up. And, for us, it's to get a foundation laid and to figure out how we move forward with this, with a lot of utilities, the partnership part of it, with the Public Service Commission, how that's going to work. So we're going through the same issues that a lot of other states are. we have to be open to what's going on, and we have to be educated on things that are happening. You mentioned the fuel cycle. There is so much going on right now in fuel recycling. You all know, and I'm certainly no expert in nuclear energy, and I'm not going to pretend to be, but I've spent a lot of time doing a lot of research. And, I know that the fuel recycle repurposing is coming in France, Germany, those countries. That's prominent, and it's coming to the United States at some point. Fuel still has 78% of its energy once it's spent, and so it is a viable energy source. Some of the newer technologies use that spent fuel for their fuel, and I don't think they're not new technologies. There's not much about nuclear that's really new. It's decades of research that have taken place. It's just updated versions and tweaking some of the technologies for the most part. With the types of fuel, the coolants that are being used now that will make the processes safer. And, I think for us, it's just to identify what our needs are, to be prepared when the technologies do separate themselves, and what can we use in Kentucky, what will help us to move forward, what can you all afford to do, because I know that's a major issue for the utilities, because the cost is outrageous at this point. But the hope is that the government's going to kind of lead the way in some of this, some of the data centers, and I know down in Paducah, if Paducah gets the data center that is one of those projects that's been proposed, to begin with, it will likely be powered just through TVA, but I expect at some point there will be a nuclear reactor on site that will power that data center. That's kind of the long-term goal, though. So I think with the steps the government's taken, that will kind of lay the ground for paths that states can follow. And you all know there are millions and millions of dollars out there right now in nuclear that utilities can take advantage of. And there is a lot of unknown. But please, from the safety perspective and using due caution, I could not agree more. And we need to do our homework, and that's the purpose of the authority that we established, was to make sure we have the expertise and availability for the expertise as we provide guidance through the authority for the legislature for policy issues. That's the plan, and that's why we did that. And, I've spent time talking to folks in Virginia with the consortium and their board there, and how they're structured. But we are in the very early stages, but what is crucial is that we don't get behind. And we have always thrived in this state because we have had cheap sources of energy, reliable energy, and we want to continue that, and we want to make the transition to nuclear in the future smooth, and we want to use the assets that we have right now. So don't think that we're trying to jump decades ahead. We support coal in the legislature, and that is part of our goal, is to keep a balanced portfolio. It's been that way from day one. So please keep that in mind, and from the legislative perspective, there is a lot of excitement within the legislature, but there is an understanding that due caution is required. But for you all, I want to be an asset to you. You all really need to lead the way with the utilities in the state on where we're going with this, and what options that we have, and we have to think outside the box as we move forward. That's what other states are doing, and being very innovative in their approaches. We have to be open to new ways, behind the meter nuclear, partnerships, all those things that allow us to move forward. But this is the future, and I think probably everyone in this room agrees that it is the future. Vision for now, fusion in the future. Virginia they're building a fusion plant. I think it's Commonwealth Fusion Technologies. They claim, it's like you said, there are a lot of claims and a lot of promises being made on technologies that aren't quite effective, but they say that they're going to be able to produce commercial fusion energy by 2030. So that's going to be interesting to see how that works. But please, I want to keep conversations with you all as part of the authority, and we'll make sure that we're setting a path that our public, very transparent path on where we're going, and make sure that we educate our state as we move forward.
Thank you very much, Senator. Oh, yes. See if you can make your way to the table.
If I could just have a word. I have to say that I disagree that not everyone in this room believes that nuclear power is the future. I'm David Brown Kinlock with LCAN. I also have a background in nuclear power from the standpoint of I went to college to be a nuclear engineer. I got my master's degree in the nuclear department in mechanical engineering, but working in the nuclear department at Rensselaer Polytech. And I have been working in the energy field ever since. The one thing I can tell you for sure that I think we all can agree on is nuclear power has always been overpromised and underdelivered. The first generation of nuclear plants on average came out 3 times the cost that they originally were told when they were approved by public service commissions across the country. And who was the one that suffered from that? And that is the ratepayer. These projects that are proposed are all theoretical. They are the highest price option out there. They are the highest risk option out there. And I just wanted to say that the only thing that is keeping utility rates low in Kentucky is the fact that we have not gone down that path. And it is the job of the Kentucky Public Service Commission to protect the public from fantasies like this, that all they will do is drive up prices, which will cause low-cost industries such as aluminum, electric steel to leave the plant, the state, and will drive up the cost for everybody. It is the Public Service Commission that is the protector of the public here, because so many of our utilities have on rose-colored glasses and want to pursue not the lowest cost option, but the highest cost option and the highest risk option. Kentucky does not need to be a leader in this area. The fact that we are not a leader, the fact that we have not pursued these crazy technologies that are overpriced, and the best example is the SMR that they tried to build in Utah. Before they even built it, the price went up almost 10 times. So we do not need to be on the forefront of this. We need to stand back and let the other states take the risk. And if they can come up with something that actually works, because it's not happened before as far as coming in at a price that's competitive, maybe we can pursue it, but not until. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Are there any other comments online or from in-person attendance? I was getting to my right. I'm Ms. Stump. Would you like to make a few comments or ask some questions?
Would you like me to come up, Jen?
However you want to do it.
Thank you, Jeb. Thank you for the commission for allowing the Office of Energy Policy to participate in the nuclear work group. As a reminder, the Kentucky Office of Energy Policy is a non-regulatory office within the Energy and Environment Cabinet. We focus on energy security, energy affordability, and energy education. Thank you for all the participants that have provided comments. From the Office of Energy Policy's perspective, we're here to provide some comments around additional understanding around where nuclear generation could fit in Kentucky's all of the above portfolio. We recently worked with the National Laboratory on some modeling And I do agree, Kentucky is not in a position to be in a first-of-a-kind track with nuclear. Given our current generation portfolio, we have the benefit of having time and can learn from those around us, and therefore look ahead to where we are with an nth-of-a-kind deployment. Our modeling suggests that nuclear energy in Kentucky would not need to occur until somewhere around the mid-2040s and have most of the generation we would need online by 2050. We're in a very unique position in that runway gives our utilities and stakeholders and regulatory authorities and our legislature the time to work together on the complex issues around nuclear. Many of the utilities have indicated that they're looking at site characterization. From our perspective, that's an immediate, tangible, and reasonable step to take to look at site feasibility and site screening, as well as undertake discussions around cost recovery for the work necessary to obtain a license, a technology agnostic license for a site in Kentucky. From the Office of Energy Policy standpoint, when we look at nuclear in our work in energy security, we see nuclear not as a substitute for any current generation technology, but an additive technology, and not as a replacement or a perfect solution. As we all know, there is no perfect fuel or energy generation source, and they all have pros and cons. I think where we are today is we have to optimize our fleet to achieve reliable, affordable, low-cost power for both our residential and our high energy intensity industrial customers. Scenarios where nuclear makes sense in Kentucky are when we look at scenarios where we're faced with high load growth and the possibility that we need a baseload generation source to mitigate natural gas price volatility. In that case, nuclear provides a baseload backbone that can help provide resilience in the times of natural disasters, which we have seen that over the years with the existing nuclear fleet, being able to respond when other generation has failed. But also, nuclear provides much needed integration support to variable resources, as well as providing steam generation and thermal support to industrial customers. I do agree, we have a lot of technologies that are uncertain right now, but I would like to remind the Commission that Kentucky is well positioned to have a timeline where we can prepare for a 2040 deployment and an additive solution that can help mitigate natural gas price volatility, help increase fuel security and energy security, reduce emissions of our portfolio. That said, we have to have continued support to work on waste management solutions. While nuclear provides low emission technology, highly reliable, its greatest weakness is in the waste and the management of the waste. So we have a continued partnership with the federal government and state and utilities that we continue to work on waste management solutions that will be sustainable for the long term if we are to increase nuclear's deployment nationwide. I think, Jeb, that's all my comments from the Energy Office's standpoint, but we're happy to chime in on the other topics as well.
Please do. You don't have to have permission to come up. Just come up, or you can stay, you can leave.
I'm gonna go back to my comfy seat. I'll be back.
Thank you. All right, Chair, Commissioner Wood, do you have any comments and questions?
I could just talk a little bit about what the PSC has done so far. We have arranged tours at a facility in North Carolina with gracious hosting from utilities. And then we also toured the facility at Watts Bar in Tennessee last week, which was really, really interesting for us. And while we were there, we had, what was the name of the group that presented to us? Kairos. Talked to us about some of their plans for nuclear energy development as well. And we have arranged to have this conference. We have joined various groups with NARUC and NACIO, and I might ask Kenya to talk about the Governors Association group that we've joined that's going to have a conference next week, 16th and 17th. And if you don't mind telling a little bit more about that, that's an opportunity if anyone didn't know about it, would like to participate. But we continue to educate ourselves and our staff and get training where possible. We attended 2 half-day trainings this summer at NARUC. One was dedicated to nuclear waste, and the other one was about development. And we are open if anyone else knows of opportunities for us to learn that please suggest them, and we'll do that. Mr. Wood, did you want to?
I don't have any comments. I'm just happy to be along for the ride. This is it's exciting, and I look forward to working with y'all.
Yeah, so Kentucky is part of this this group of states who are interested in becoming part of the nuclear world and exploring that. But can you tell a little bit about the groups?
Currently, through the National Association of State Energy Officials, we're a member of 11 states, looking at how states work to deploy nuclear. We currently co-chair the group with Tennessee, New York, and I've got some others on there I can't remember, and myself. An RFP will be released on from the 11-state NASIO group. We're excited to be a member of that group because, as mentioned, it's going to take regional and maybe multi-utility partnerships, multi-state partnerships in order to lift up nuclear. As far as the NGA, that's the National Governors Association. With the Governor's Office support, we were able to receive technical assistance from the National Governors Association to host an in-state retreat around nuclear energy. That is next week, the 16th and 17th, where we will have a stakeholder discussion around topics ranging from financial risk, community engagement, which is a topic that has not come up today, but is essential to moving this forward in terms of community engagement and discussions. And we will also talk about developer and siting, and then day 2 we will look at challenges and opportunities as we move forward. So we encourage you, registration is open. Most of you are already signed up to be there, and we look forward to seeing you at the Kentucky History Center next week on the 16th.
Okay, thanks so much, Kim.
Okay. All right. I'll attempt to move on to the next topic, but I think there's a lot of overlap in everything, all the comments that we make. So apologies in advance for preparing a schedule that we probably may not adhere to. But the next topic that we were going to discuss would be, as directed by Senate Joint Resolution, is to identify regulations primarily that the Public Service Commission has on books that would need to be changed, amended, done away with, that could, I think the language is to review and necessarily amend all other administrative regulations promulgated by the Commission to ensure that they do not contain any provisions that would impede the Commission from effectively regulating nuclear facilities or obstruct the development of nuclear facilities. I'd be content if people want to rest on their comments, but the filed comments of any particular regulations have been identified. But this is the beginning of a process. We might identify regulations going on. This time, I will start in the back corner, Mr. Spinard, if you have anything to speak on this, or you feel free to pass.
Well, thank you. I will make a comment on the Commission's IRP regulation, 807 KR 5:058. The integrated resource planning process began in the 1980s. And it is properly described as robust as in terms of, if you just take a look at the records of the integrated resource planning proceedings that have been conducted, certainly in at least the last decade. One of the things that I've heard is the notion with regard to these types of facilities, partnerships are greater coordination of efforts between utilities. At the moment, and this is not a criticism at all, this is a very straightforward assessment. At the moment, although the integrated resource planning process on a utility by utility basis is very robust, it is somewhat siloed. So to the extent that there is any notion or talking about the potential or talking about the advisability, because IRP is action forcing by the commission of coordination and efforts between utilities, the IRP regulation is going to have to address the silo issue. One of the ways to address that siloing issue is with regard to information. The IRPs are triennial, so there's always going to be, in one sense, there's always going to be an IRP out there. But from an informational standpoint, and the amendment of needs to be done is our consideration giving to a development of a template format within the IRP such that with these facilities, so that you can actually compare one IRP to the other on these points and nothing gets lost in translation, and that the information that's being placed out there is complete. Again, I do not have for this process needs to be if we're going to consider partnerships between utilities, to make that information work better, to be comparable, and to be complete. CRP process is very robust and is expected to stay on that same path. To the extent that there's any type of coordination, and even on perhaps issues like transmission, and respectfully submit revisions be made. In terms of the Commission's regulations which may impact nuclear regulation, it's a very tough question to address, because right now the reality is that in Kentucky, for a certificate on their X-ray machine, you will see the group in the state that is licensing them and inspecting them is Department for Public Health. At the moment, the statute has limited jurisdiction. So then when we see this phrase, nuclear ecosystem, which I'm not entirely sure what that means, but I'll take a run at it, is that it's not simply the commission that's going to play a role in the nuclear ecosystem. It is public health. It is other agencies within EEC. It will be, for example, security-related issues for these facilities. So that when we look at these regulations which may impact nuclear regulation, to me this goes back to it's not a matter of the cart before the horse. It's a matter of not really understanding whether or not we have both the horse and the cart at the table at the moment. From a principle standpoint, is that for the Public Service Commission, there needs to be a more thought to the approach, because right now so many of the Commission's regulations are simply unique to the Commission, and the Commission's exercise or sharing jurisdiction with another agency, or coordinating an exercise of jurisdiction with another agency. And that's going to be a very laborious process. But on this one, it's specific regulations that are currently existing, because it's just, it is in all sense a moving target, but that's, appreciate the opportunity to comment.
And so this is not an offer to come back and work for the Public Service Commission and to coordinate this, is this, Mr. Spinard?
No, Mr.
Okay, all right, we could get your old office together.
I wonder if some of the utilities who operate in to coordinate the different types of regulation that currently PSC doesn't necessarily have jurisdiction over.
Yeah, just, there were a couple of topics that I think were brought up there. One, integrated resource planning. I'll set that one aside for council.
Yeah.
The other one, regulation. I appreciate having the opportunity, and I love the idea that Kentucky is forward-thinking to learn and set that, you know, with our nuclear plant in Michigan, most of the regulation that is needed is provided by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And the only state agency that really, other than OSHA, and those is the Environmental Protection Agency at the state level and at the federal level. Just ask that we give time to explore the scope of the regulation and the oversight that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission provides, so that you can get from that confidence that you don't need to adopt other regulation in the state. So it's a model that has worked in all of the states.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because, I mean, the commission, at the end of the day, is really an economic regulator. You know, utilities can, a lot of times, do what they want. It's whether or not they get the money for it at the back end of it, and that's assuming that you have all the other approval. Yes, yes, sir, Mr. Shapiro, you can come up if you'd like.
Yeah, no, this is just a question for you.
Sure.
The NRC, you know, what you just said, I believe, is that most of the regulations about the nuclear power are going to be provided by the NRC. But my question is, does the NRC, and this is just, I don't know, does the NRC have people and staff that can go out in the states and do the kind of oversight on the ground that needs to be?
Regulatory Commission works. There is the federal presence in DC, but then it's also broken down in regions. There are 4 regions that have regional administrators. And with respect to boots on the ground, the NRC has inspection regimen and inspection schedule. We do have at each nuclear facility 2 NRC inspectors.
In oversight in the development and construction?
Oh, certainly. So and this gets into the licensing process, and we can go into greater detail in the licensing process. There are inputs that we put into, whether that's the early site permit or the construction permits, the utilities, the licensee, 18 months to 2 years to prepare, and then it takes the NRC 18 months to 24 months right now. We hope to expedite that a bit. To review that during that review period, they will make the necessary. Once a construction permit is granted, then construction can actually start. And then there is a second piece, the operating license, where the NRC, again, boots on the ground. They will come to the facility. They will make certain that the facility has been constructed in accordance with the design that was approved in the construction permit operating license, and that allows the licensee then to start loading the first fuel. So, yes, there is significant engagement at the site and with the licensee from beginning to end.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the comprehensive response. Mr. Shapiro, do you have any follow-up questions? We can come back to it. This is an open-ended conversation. So, Mr. Gish, you've been thrown under the proverbial bus to talk about the IRP regulation.
Yeah.
Any other regulations?
The IRP bus is a large bus.
Yeah.
And I know the chair for IRP process in general, and I think we're very interested in seeing that going through. As it relates to nuclear, I think the point that, there's nothing in the IRP regulations that prohibit anyone from evaluating nuclear. Joint structure in an IRP is a little interesting because, Kentucky Power's IRP looks at Kentucky Power's need and Kentucky Power's plan to address those needs. But I don't think there's anything specific in the IRP regulations as it relates to nuclear that is particularly troublesome or would prevent a barrier from having that in the IRP process, right? Similarly, I don't think there's a lot in the commission regulations themselves that would prohibit a utility from pursuing a nuclear generation of we'll probably have to point this to you, is that there could be some statutory improvements or changes or enactments, and it's not really changing something, it's something new, that would help the utilities, my client and Rocco's client and all those guys, to help move along the path to develop a nuclear generation analysis. And if you looked at our comments, the first section of them, and we have an A through F of potential issues that are really statutory issues that we think would be helpful to help promote nuclear generation. I would like to call on Noel Coates, if possible, to talk about some changes, some statutory changes that have occurred in other jurisdictions that from our perspective we think are helpful and are interesting and help move this process along. And she's been involved on a kind of a day-to-day basis in implementing some of the statutory changes there. So if I could ask her to give a quick summary of what we've seen in Indiana and Virginia and how that has impacted the way that the AP utilities in those jurisdictions are moving forward with evaluating nuclear power.
Yeah, sure thing. Hi, everyone. So Virginia was the first mover, within our footprint on this issue, really. And a couple years ago, there was a law passed that encourages utilities, basically AEP and then Dominion, to pursue early site development of SMRs. So this law specifically allows for the recovery of these early site development costs that go ultimately towards getting an early site permit from the NRC, which is really the first step in the development of SMRs. So Dominion has received approval for its application to incur and then recover these early site development costs for a facility by North Anna. And we have pending before the State Corporation Commission a similar application for the Joshua Falls that Shane mentioned earlier. That's near Lynchburg. So that if we get approval, it means the commission has deemed it prudent for us to incur these early site development costs towards the pursuit of an early site permit. And then we will get cost recovery on an ongoing basis. It's capped, but what it really does is allow utilities to not suffer the financial harm of incurring all these costs, which can, obviously add up, but there's a lag to the recovery. So this basically prevents that lag. Indiana has a similar for near the Rockport facility, which is a facility owned by I&M, our affiliate there. So they're just useful. They prevent, in the case of the facility does go online, it prevents cost shock, really rate shock. It just spreads the cost over a longer amount of time. And the early site permit is an asset that can be sold to another utility. If say we decide not to go forward with it, we can sell that to somebody else for them to develop it and then credit back the ratepayers for any costs that we've recovered from them. So happy to take any questions about how that's working. We'll find out. The hearing is next month in Virginia, and happy to share the information about anything from those proceedings.
I just want to highlight a couple of things, and it goes back to the discussion again about the long look, the forward looking. The early site permit, it is a process that's governed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We do the necessary site characterization. We submit the application to the NRC. The NRC approves the early site permit application, and then it is valid for a 20-year period. To us, and there is a move afoot perhaps to request that gets extended out to a 30-year period, but nonetheless, an early site permit is good for 20 years. And so if you were to identify a site in Kentucky and you were to do the characterization, and whichever entity were to do it, that is an asset that's good for 20 years. And to Noel's point, if a company had proceeded with a site permit and they got it all the way to the end and it was approved by the NRC, it can't be transferred to another company. It is completely transferable, and that's why it's such a good asset to have.
And Jeb, I think that is our comments on numbers 2, 3, and 4. So I think we might be moving ahead a little better.
I said there is a
lot of overlap between the two, for all three of these things. Every battle plan survives first contact with the enemy, but then we change. Not to suggest anybody here is the enemy, but
I'm going to skip back to Ms. Erzberger because we didn't want to skip over you for comments about the regulations or any changes in the IRP process. Do you have anything you'd like to bring up?
No more comments on the changes in the IRP process, and KRC generally supports the comments made by David Spinard. And I guess I would just like to add that in terms of when we're looking at the administrative bodies that might be, or the executive branch bodies and agencies that might have administrative regulations that are implicated in in nuclear generation in Kentucky, I would just like to point out for the record that we recently have been tying our state standards to the federal standard, and that backstop in terms of the regulatory backstop has also been changing quite drastically recently. And that's something to consider in terms of which, how these administrative regulations are formulated, and whether an element of caution should be introduced into the language specifically. For example, in the proposed language, it comments about taking out administrative regulations that would obstruct the development of the nuclear ecosystem in the Commonwealth, and I think there's a possibility that could run into, that could create a conflict in the execution of the other parts of this Public Service Commission's mission, and also could run into conflict with the practicalities of safeguarding the citizens of the Commonwealth if nuclear were to be introduced in our state. And that's all I have to add.
Thank you. Representative Elgini and KU?
Yeah, I think we kind of agree with one of the comments that was made. We don't feel there's any current regulations that impede the commission from regulation or obstructing construction of nuclear. In the review, we have looked at kind of the FAC regulation and feel maybe there are a couple inconsistencies related to fossil and nuclear. That's our view, but it could be.
Speaking of the fact there's a restriction in the FAC to recovering of only, well, no, it includes nuclear.
It does
fuel,
include
doesn't it?
nuclear, but there's a couple of references that it's like to one utility or jointly on a nuclear. So trying to understand, it almost seems like you couldn't have the singular nuclear from that standpoint, utility. But that's just our view from that standpoint, and maybe could be resolved by minor changes there.
Okay. All right. Mr. Crosby, you have any?
My colleague nailed it.
All right. Mr. Zisenza?
Nothing further to add.
Okay. Thank you. Kenya?
Thank you, Jeb. I think in respect to the IRP, as a non-regulatory office who has participated in IRP processes from a standpoint of where our modeling has shown value that may not be appropriately captured in IRPs, we see that there is a system cost reduction and a system value when certain types of generation are added, such as nuclear, that while the overnight capital costs may be very expensive, the system shows additional cost savings in other parts of it, such as transmission or fuel or other ancillary services. So I think from that standpoint, while I don't really like the idea of moving from a least cost to value, I do think that within a least cost system, there is a way to accommodate looking at system costs that may not have traditionally been evaluated in resource planning. I'd also like to point out, I think the IRPs with respect to nuclear are going to have to evolve in terms of community engagement and stakeholder engagement on a level that may not have been traditionally seen with other generation sources, and how that also aligns with NRC community engagement processes. Jeb, in terms of other administrative regulations, when we look at a nuclear, I'd like the commission and stakeholders to remember we did a 2017 report. I think it was Senator Carroll's probably after we lifted the moratorium. That 2017 report was a review of state administrative regulations and regulatory processes to assure cost and environmental protection associated with the construction, operation, waste management, and decommissioning of nuclear facilities. A good starting point for a review of any administrative regulatory changes would be the 2017 report, and to evaluate since that time, has anything changed with respect to what the findings were in that report. From a Office of Energy Policy perspective, when we look at implications long-term and regulatory changes that may need to accommodate nuclear technology as it advances, it has been mentioned the possibility of behind-the-meter, also micro-reactors, although not technologically proven. We have to have the foresight to look at what technological changes could happen, and does our regulatory processes accommodate that? If we look at co-location, we have to look at how those facilities would be interconnected. And I think the statute and the regulatory processes we have in place are around qualifying facilities under PURPA. I'd like to note that PURPA currently, as it's written, does not accommodate nuclear facilities. Therefore, the qualifying facility tariffs that we normally use to interconnect behind-the-meter generation sources would face problematic interconnection when our tariffs do not align to accommodate nuclear as we reference PURPA. I think that's a discussion we would have to have on what kind of interconnection tariffs would be necessary for an eventuality where we may have a behind-the-meter nuclear facility co-located with an industrial customer, assuming the utility did not own that generation. I think the other thing is, because Kentucky is located and connected to two regional transmission organizations, MISO and PJM, there is a future scenario where, assuming cost reductions and technology advancements are made, where you could face a merchant nuclear facility similar to what we have today with merchant solar. Just as a personal comment, having worked here 20 years, I never thought the merchant siting board would have so many solar cases, considering it was originally designed for merchant natural gas. I think that is a history we must learn from, because that was a technology that's evolved, and now we're facing 50 or so merchant solar cases as technology advanced and cost reductions were achieved that enabled merchant generation facilities to bid into both MISO and PJM. We'd be remiss if we did not think into the future that nuclear could at some point achieve cost reductions and put it in place to where we would have merchant nuclear facilities bidding into the markets. That brings up the siting board regulations and how those align and accommodate nuclear with respect to working alongside the NRC, and how the siting board would be utilized in a merchant nuclear scenario. Other than that, Jeb, I think that's all I have on IRPs, the siting board, and PURPA. But I would encourage everyone to look at the 2017 report, as it's a good starting point on if we do have administrative regulations. I do think many of the issues around nuclear siting and cost recovery, it's not that they're not allowed within the purview of the PSC administrative regulations. It's that they have never been tried, tested, or do we have an existing precedent by which to work from. In that instance, it's a question of, is there a need for a regulatory change, or is it need for just stronger guidance on how to use existing processes such as the CPCN or construction work in progress I do agree that early site permitting and cost recovery is an area that may require some additional regulatory considerations, as many of the costs with nuclear occur a very long time before you actually see construction. And how we protect ratepayers in those scenarios is something that we must consider. That's all I've got, Jeb.
Well, thank you, Kenya. I appreciate that. Chair?
Yeah, I was gonna ask if anybody wanted to talk about the siting board process, the Kentucky State Board on electric generation and transmission siting. Although utilities don't have to use it, it's for merchants. Maybe some of the other environmental groups have thought about that, or obviously if the utilities have any ideas, that is one area that I thought we might need to look at updating our regs and statutes. And then Allison,
Mr. Moser may get mad at me for saying this, but you skipped over EKPC and Mr. Moser on that, and I didn't know if he had any input that he wanted to.
He seemed quite content, but I do apologize for that, Mr. Moser.
Allison may regret this. Got one qualitative comment about the IRP process, and that, from my point of view, it's a snapshot in time. The moment we file it, as a utility, conditions on the ground change, correct? We filed our IRP back in April. All of the analytics were completed well before the first of the year, the prior year, and then we experienced another terrible winter with another third in a row extreme peak on our system, which changed the entire way we looked at the information that we put in our IRP, and then we come to the commission and we litigate the changes that we have made to our CPCN and have those ticked and tied back to what we filed in the IRP, and that's oftentimes it's just different because conditions have changed on the ground. And as we go into the nuclear experience, that opens up a whole other realm of changes that emerge real time that could never have been foreseen when the IRP was filed. I'm certainly not advocating for an annual IRP because that would be a continual process. That would
something that the commission staff would not be for as well.
But I'm just cautioning that there's going to be a lot of changes between what's filed in a utilities IRP and what is reflected in forthcoming CPCNs during the interim period of time. And then I highly doubt that there will ever be a nuclear merchant plant constructed in the U.S. Right now we're seeing the big infrastructure boom with data centers, the huge demands that we're seeing potentially coming on our collective systems. But these could be 15 to 20 year phenomenons. So you're not going to invest in a 60 to 80 year asset to seek these types of loads. So the concept of merchant generation, having been in the merchant power business before, I think it's not applicable to nuclear power. So I don't think the siting board will probably see any
maybe
request for that.
partnerships though between utilities and private companies.
Well, yeah, certainly, but I think that at some point that private entity will exit the scene, and then it's how the utility assimilates that in the process. And that's not just nuclear, that's for combined cycles that may have to be built, or other solar projects or other type of projects. So certainly that's something that's we're going to have to navigate. But.
Thank you, and I apologize for skipping.
No problem.
I'll probably, I don't know, keep it a surprise where I start next time. So, all right, so these are the comments from the room. Senator Carroll, do you have anything that you would like to add to what you've heard?
Yeah, one thing that I'm a little more curious about with the cost recovery in the lady that spoke remotely in Michigan and Virginia, how did those utilities, how did they engage the public on this, and what was the term of recoveries to lessen the impact on the ratepayers? And I'm sorry, I don't.
Noel, did you hear that question?
The term of recovery, is that what you asked? Or the community engagement?
Yeah, both. The community engagement, how was that addressed with the ratepayers? And then what was the average term in those two situations.
Okay, yeah, so community engagement, Joshua Falls facility is kind of in a nuclear corridor in Lynchburg. It's next to Framatome, which makes the components of plants around the country, and then a facility that builds for the Navy's nuclear fleet. So it's along the river, and you can stand on the site and look down and see two other, basically huge factories that are part of the industry. So there's a lot of support already in that area for the industry, and we've had so much community outreach as far as open houses, and basically you have our engineers come down and talk to the community. We've had a lot of positive support, which is unusual, as we all know, given that we've had some reputational issues with nuclear in the past in our country and across the world. So we are enjoying community support for now. And as far as the support of other individuals, we'll find out at the hearing next month. We have not received any negative testimony from the Attorney General's or Sierra Club or anyone. Dominion faced a little bit more pushback in their proceeding, not with their plan to go forward, but with the amount of money that they can recover from their customers, which is subject to an overall limit that's in the statute. These early development costs. And Dominion's facility is located next to an existing facility, so they're not facing the same sort of community backlash that you might have expected in another day and age or another area. I think going as far as the term of recovery, like I said, that the amount of early site development costs that we are allowed to recover in both states is limited. So you would be kind of diligent and very prudent with your customers' dollars, because you know that you're faced with a limit on what you can spend. And I think that's important for both customers and for the utility to have that limitation. I hope that helps.
It does. So the discussions about the amount of recovery, and I think the early site permitting process, 70 million roughly? And it sounds like that's going to be the key at the point that we move forward on that, is to make sure that there is a proper balance, and you can articulate to the ratepayers why it's this amount, and make it an amount that is something that they can stomach reasonably. And so I guess that, as far as the statutes, that needs to be a consideration on what those limits are as far as recovery. Accurate?
Yes, accurate.
To your point, if I may, Senator, one of the very first things that we engaged in was community involvement, and making sure, especially in the Joshua Falls area in Virginia, from the very beginning, we engaged the community, because we're not going to build a nuclear plant where customers don't want it, and we're not going to build a nuclear plant where community support wanted this. So it is extremely important that the very first action involves community engagement.
And that is one of the main responsibilities of the authority, as established by statute, is to engage the public and educate the public. We're advancing quickly, but yet we have to take steps back to understand that we have, for a large part, a state that's not quite prepared in a lot of areas. There's still a lot of education that needs to be done. And so it's trying to figure out, from a legislative standpoint, what is the speed that we move ahead? Trying to balance all these factors, the need for more energy, what's happening in other states, making sure that we are balanced in our portfolios, making sure that we are using due diligence in whatever we do. That's what's so difficult about all of this, and things are changing almost on a weekly basis, it seems, as far as technology and what some of the other states are doing. The partnerships between states, that seems to be, Kenya, that seems to be more of a topic, and the Senate President has even brought that up on a few occasions during conversations. And I'm wondering, as a state, is that really where we need to start looking? And nuclear is in Kentucky, in our part of the state, know, we get nuclear energy from TVA, just not located in state with the reactors, but, and I'm not sure in northern Kentucky with Duke, is there, with some of that power, is it nuclear generated?
Not in Kentucky.
Not in Kentucky, okay. So as we move forward, trying to balance all this and trying to set the speed on how we do this, that's gonna be difficult, and it's really educating a state that is still learning. And there's growing support that I have seen, especially from the younger generation. I got all kinds of calls from young people, especially engineering students at UK, during the session as we were moving these things forward. And even within the legislature, I think these two pieces of legislation passed unanimously. And that's going from not being able to get the moratorium lifted for many years, and now you're passing bills unanimously. So, but the cost is going to be, I think, the main factor moving on. And I know that recovery is a big part of that for the utilities to be able to move forward. But how do we mitigate those costs with partnerships, spreading it out, and what are the limits? And can we reduce, hopefully the federal government's going to find ways to reduce that cost. I know they are expediting some of the permitting processes, and hopefully those types of activities are going to result in less cost that are going to make these plans, as we move forward, more feasible.
Thank you very much, Senator Carroll. I think some of these topics we'll touch on a little bit, but I'm going to look to my right to the chair, or Commissioner Wood, or anybody over there. Do you have any further comments or questions?
I don't have comments right now, guys. Yeah, you're allowed.
I appreciate the comments made about the IRP and the IRP process. And I thought that Mr. Mosier's points was well taken on how things can change quickly and have, and that the IRP is a snapshot in time. So I agree that how that is handled over time, and especially recently there's been a lot of certificate cases filed almost concurrently with the IRPs, and that makes the evaluation, that complicates the evaluation. And so I look forward to comments and working with the utilities to try and improve that process.
Can you?
I think from our standpoint, other topics that may not be within the regulatory mission of the commission but are relevant to the conversation are around workforce development, as well as some of the work we've done with SOAR. So we do work with SOAR today on workforce development as it relates to nuclear. We had a successful hiring event with Framatome. I think it was AP or Duke mentioned Framatome. Kentucky does have a portion of the population that does participate in the nuclear workforce. We're in close proximity to the existing fleet. Our work in Eastern Kentucky, while different to Western Kentucky's fuel work, Eastern Kentucky work has been centered on supply chain and workforce development. The existing fleet does require parts and services that can help employ Kentuckians, and workforce development is a part of this conversation. But as mentioned, the cart and the horse, you have to be very timely and intentional on workforce development, so it's triggered at the appropriate time to meet the needs. And I think we're very sensitive to that, but we have a good working relationship with SOAR on how we can look at Eastern Kentucky, even outside of siting, how Eastern Kentucky can participate in supporting the existing nuclear fleet with workforce development, supply chain, and with an eye to potential siting in the future. But that's where SOAR is really working with us on the community engagement side to have discussions addition, I'd like to just say, the Nuclear Energy Development Authority is not really represented yet, but will have a role to play in how the commission works alongside the Nuclear Energy Development Authority is an important topic that we need to think about. The authority will have the ability to work with communities as well as authorize to look at nuclear-ready communities. I think that's a discussion where we can have stakeholder involvement. And what does that mean? As well as the authority is tasked with siting analysis. We have been fortunate enough through NASIO that we have technical support through the Idaho National Laboratory GAIN, and they are assisting the NASIO states on preliminary siting screening. And I will say screening does not mean feasibility, does not mean a reactor will be placed there. It just means looking at mitigating factors around siting nuclear power generation facilities. All this to say that community engagement still remains the center of all of these discussions, and I appreciated AEP's comments because without the community support, projects do not move forward, whether it be fuel cycle, workforce development, power generation, waste management. And I think, Chair, that's all I have to add.
All righty. I do want to say with regard to the regulations is that the commission is undertaking an internal review of all of its regulations, and at some point we'll start sharing its proposed edits with all stakeholders. It's a process that Mr. Spinard's looking at me that started when Mr. Spinard was here, but was, I think, halted because of COVID. But anyway, the commission is starting that. So just in a generic sense, all stakeholders will have an opportunity to look at all of the regulations, but we'll always have to keep in the back of our mind changes that might be necessary for to further the implementation of Senate Joint Resolution 140. At this point, does anybody have an objection to a 15-minute break? I think this might, I don't know if there's a good point to break because all the topics are overlapping, but I'm going to exercise my authority from being in the big chair and say, let's get back here at about 10 after 11. Does that sound good? All right, thank you. We overshot 11:10 by a few minutes, but close enough for government work, I suppose. Anyway, let's see if we can get started again. We're back recording this, and I failed to mention that the recording of this conference will be available on our website, and it will take the place of the normal informal conference memoranda that commission staff usually generates, just because I think it would have been a difficult task to coalesce the issues that are discussed here. So usually that's posted pretty quickly after the fact. So I'm going to keep on going through the topics here, but I know that that were listed in the August 1st order. But I want to start with one of the questions. Maybe I can dispense with this. There's a question about timelines. At least with regard to the Public Service Commission, I can think of two timelines that would be relevant to nuclear siting. One would be the timeline for issuing a CPCN, and the second would be for issuing the site compatibility certificate. There are amendments to those statutes recently that put an 8-month statute of limitations on those particular statutes where no statutory limit had been provided before. And I think the statutes provide that if the commission does not issue a final order within that period of time, that the compatibility certificate and or the CPCN are deemed approved as filed. So bearing that in mind, are there any other timeline considerations that are at least within the purview of the Public Service Commission or possibly the state that could be of any issues, could be of any issue that we need to discuss today? I'm going to start here with Mr. Diacenzo.
Well, thank you. The one that jumps to mind, just given the long lead time with construction, is the requirement to commence construction upon issuing a CPCN within 1 year. That's one thing that potentially would need to be looked at, and what is the definition then as it relates to nuclear of commencing construction?
All right, and so without pulling at the statute, but I believe that it's KRS 28020 would be the relevant CPCN statute, and it says that you have to exercise it with 1 year, but I think there are some outs for litigation, as well as getting the proper permitting and the like of that. So are you saying that you would need either greater clarity on what those issues could be, those events could be, or even just like a CPCN for a nuclear plant does not have to be exercised within 1 year, a statutory change, I guess?
Potentially, clarification or a change. I think either could resolve that.
All right, so that's a good point. LG and KU?
Yeah, I think that would be similar in regards to what's been mentioned, in that, as Rocco mentioned, that 1 year permitting, but does that permit come and still allow you to start construction within a year?
Yeah, I think it's good faith. Yeah, you start construction in good faith. Does that mean just moving a spade of dirt versus a truckload of gravel, or laying a pad? I mean, you sometimes run into that. In my experience, a lot of times has been with cell towers, because if there's a bat migration going on, all of a sudden they can stop. Right. The permitting or just federal funds availability, the like of that. So, whether
agree, no comments.
Yeah, and I think we'd agree. I mean, I think that we would prefer that the timelines for issuing the CPCNs be untouched. I think a lot of again, as mentioned earlier, that the analysis here would be kind of an economic one, the whether or not this is needed and stuff, but once the CPCN is issued, what that, understanding the process is going to be a lengthy one. There's a lot more permitting involved.
All right, and realizing that the changes to the CPCN statute are outside the commission's control.
Understood.
Ms. Ernstberger?
No comment at this time.
All right. Mr. Spinard?
Nothing to add at this moment.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about cost and cost recovery. I know that we have touched on these issues. a little bit, we haven't gone into a greater deal of detail on this. And so to kick off this topic, I'd like to start with LG&E and KU.
I think it's been mentioned about the least cost concept, but I think one of the things that we would look at is, it's also been mentioned by a few here, is that early site permit. And is that looked at as an asset? And how is that looked at as being used and useful now for the company? And again, I think even Kenya said, maybe those are some things that the CPCN process hasn't been tested on, of how do you bring that forward and get approval for that piece, since we are talking about a pretty good period of time and a pretty good amount of money there just to get that asset has been referred to, that you move forward within 20 years, I think has been mentioned, or do you sell it?
And so,
And I think Noelle even said something about it at that hearing in Virginia.
and so
next year.
when you, and I'm,
Next one.
I do not have an accounting background, and I'm glad that I work with people that do. But you're saying, so you create the asset, decide, you have the, site permit, the early site permit. Are you saying, how to treat it? Are you saying, include it in rate base, or?
Right, you include a rate base, you said as a regulatory asset. How would you go through that process, knowing that the company's investing, all the utilities are investing, a significant amount of money, that may even come up to the point of where there's been orders about, you need to come forth to us if it's over a certain amount of money for a CPCN. Well, that's clearly an investment that may hit that mark. So then how do you handle that? Because it's just been something that's not been tested through the current process.
Right, so even if it was like a smaller amount, it's a deemed ordinary course of business, but you still, it's a novel issue whether or not that's something that could be.
It's leading to something that's.
Right, okay, so rather than
Different.
to book it as a regulatory asset, or keep it out, I understand.
Yeah,
There's
there's
some-
multiple ways to probably look at it, and then just how would we handle that from recovery?
Okay, all right. Because, all right, I don't want to get too far down in the weeds, but I appreciate that. And in terms of other cost recovery, that's just the early site permit, but.
Right,
What about other?
Clearly more stages there that you're going down through and figuring out how does that process work, about even talked about from the construction standpoint. There's from my understanding, you got the site and permitting, the design, let alone before you get to construction and commissioning. And
Okay.
then the things that are happening down the path in regards to decommissioning.
Okay, all right. Did I start here? I started here with this. Okay, Rocco.
Again, my comments that we submitted go into greater detail, but to continue with what Mr. Lovekamp had said, things to consider, other costs such as licensing and project development costs, something to consider as you're progressing through time. Again, the company believes that flexible regulatory treatment, cost recovery mechanisms are a way to allow those costs to be recovered over time rather than all at once from customers through a rate case, avoid the rate shock, so to speak. Those are successful tools that have been used in other jurisdictions that could be useful here as well. Somebody had early on mentioned construction work in progress as another tool for cost recovery in between rate cases. Those are just things that come to mind.
Okay, all right. Mr. Spinard, I keep on changing clockwise and counterclockwise. I understand that. Sorry if I caught you off guard.
No, it's kind of right. And so we're on cost and cost recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is going back to the one area, to be careful not to cover new ground, or not to cover old ground too many times, but this is one area where it's this type, nuclear power is just different. And the commission's current process for reviewing applications for public convenience and necessity is rigorous. And it is the certainty associated with the project being built is pretty much there. With nuclear plants, this is one of the factors that their risk is just different. The risk of a project being abandoned. And when you allow from ratepayers the current recovery from of cost for a project that is that risk of abandonment, that's a fundamental shift of responsibility and risk from the company's shareholders and from the companies in general that some don't have shareholders, to the ratepayers themselves. The pertinent statute is 278030, and that's that rates should be fair, just, and reasonable. And this is the problem associated with allowing current cost recovery for these types of projects. One of the really interesting things that had been stated a little bit earlier today, and it had never crossed my mind in that the break following discussion, is the notion of a nuclear plant that's a merchant plant, and I think that the record always speaks for itself, but that it's kind of an odd thing to even think about. And one of the reasons it's an odd thing to think about is that it's the notion about, would a nuclear merchant plant ever be built? Because one of the main things is that they don't have the ability to use current return for ratepayers, the notion of construction work in progress in the rate base. And this is where this energy and cost recovery, cutting to the chase, it just is such a remarkable shift in risk. And if you allow a current return on the investment, in all regards, you are shifting that to ratepayers. And if the project is abandoned, or alternatively, because the CPCN process is ex ante, you get the certificate, then you build, and then you talk in terms of cost recovery. When you're doing that certificate application, you're making your best estimates of what the cost will be. And in the last few decades, that discipline that the utilities have had to go through to justify their CPCNs, those cost numbers are usually fairly good and fairly reliable. When we switch gears over to the history in that same timeline about nuclear facilities, and you start taking a look at cost and what the actual cost of those plants will be when they are eventually built, if they are not abandoned, that is the type of thing that when you unleash that risk, or you put that risk on the shareholders, risk moving from the shareholders to the ratepayers, that's the problem. And that's the problem with fair, just, and reasonable rates, and the reassignment of who's going to take the risk and who's going to get the benefits should the project, in theory, pan out. So when we talk about cost and cost recovery, first, to get on a granular basis, if there are going to be projects that are proposed, there have to be well thought out, well tested, and clearly reasonable estimates associated with what the cost overruns are going to be. And this is not the typical contingency that gets put into a lot of the projects at the moment. And that's going to be a very difficult one, because if you start talking about what these facilities will likely look like and how it likely plays out, that probably would go back to whether eventually, when it's all said and done, should we have built this thing in the first place? Well, if the ratepayers have already paid for it, how do you protect them? If you are going to, there's got to be some type of disciplinary matter placed upon the utilities that are going to protect the shareholders from cost overruns and from cancellations. And that's what I don't see proposed, and that's what I haven't heard anybody. I've heard a lot of people talk about, well, this is how we should do it, because this facilitates the site and construction operation and so forth. But at what risk? You can do it. You can facilitate moving forward with these projects. Have you placed into the process safeguards to preserve fair, just, and reasonable rates for these ratepayers. And that is really what cuts to the main concern associated with this particular section.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, Mr. Spinard. I appreciate that. Mr. Ernstberger.
I'd just like to add to that, in looking at fair, just, and reasonable, a potential way to do this is to look at the levelized cost of nuclear that are relative to other electricity sources, and then compare the cost and risks associated to ratepayers. Mr. Spinard covered it in a wonderful way, so I will not go over the same information. But in addition to the looking at the cost associated with siting and operation, we also need to look at costs associated with waste management, the storage and disposal of spent nuclear fuel and waste. And historically, when you're looking at spent nuclear fuel and the reprocessing of it, it's only a fraction of the waste that's produced that can actually be reprocessed with current technologies. So that's something that should be taken into account when you're looking at the levelized cost, and should be taken account at the front end. That's all I have at the moment.
Sorry, I'm just completing my notes. Kentucky Power?
Yeah, I think, Ms. Coates spoke well about the experience that AP and their subsidiaries have had in Virginia and Indiana with the statutes there regarding early development cost recovery and some of the guardrails that are existing there. I don't think anyone is like, well, we just want to spend whatever we want and just foist all of that onto the ratepayers. There will be, there's guidelines in those, there's guardrails, sorry, not guidelines, guardrails in those statutes. And so that sort of efforts to eliminate the, to use a kind of a PSC type buzzword of regulatory lag between when those costs are incurred and when they're recovered because of the long timeline of this project development is something that would be important to help foster this development going forward. And again, I think part of that probably has to come not from regulations, but not from you guys, Senator Carroll's shop. So.
Yes, the statutory changes versus regulatory.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts, if I may. We've talked about merchant and certainly a merchant facility building. I agree, but just for clarity, there is a merchant nuclear fleet in the United States right now. There are merchant plants out there. And then with respect to reprocessing is not legal in the United States right now, although it's being effectively used in Europe. And it's likely not something that we would pursue just because of the availability of uranium. So when we talk about storage and having the independent storage facilities, and I guess I would take a bit exception with the discussion around temporary. We have an independent storage facility at the Cook plant, and we consider it a permanent storage facility at the site. Now, do we all hope someday we get a federal repository to ship it all to? Yes, but right now we consider it a permanent local location. And then when we put together cost estimates for a nuclear project, and I completely agree, and I'm not going to argue with it, the cost is very high. When we look at this, and this is the industry perspective, that the first one, of course, is going to be the most expensive, and we believe it's going to take, you may hear the term order book, where for a particular technology, we're going to want enough of them so that after 6, 7, 8 of them, then that first of a kind cost gets down to something that's more reasonable, the nth of a kind cost. And even at that level, it's probably still 70% of the first of a kind cost, which is still going to be high. I'm not going to argue that. I won't go into details here, but we do believe that there is a project delivery model that will allow us to move forward with the facility without burdening the typical rate-based customers. And I don't want to go into details here, but I also don't want that idea completely dismissed. There are potential project delivery models that will work, even given the price of these projects.
And so, I'm going to actually, Mr. Moser, last question to you, then I have a question, kind of gender. Go ahead.
Okay, clearly construction work in progress is a big deal to an electric cooperative because we're a nonprofit. We don't have the capital resources to carry those costs in between rate cases. So clearly, cost recovery and its timing is essential. These are extremely expensive investments. They have to make sense over 60 years. A combined cycle has to make sense over 30 years. These are long-lived assets. So you have to look at the levelized cost of those over that same, you have to make them equalize them, or normalize them. So that's extremely important. I hear the concerns about costs. I don't know of a utility, or maybe even a utility customer that looks back to the plants that were built in the 70s and 80s and are sorry that they weren't built, or that are sorry that they were built. Like I said, these are long-term investments. They provide the level of resiliency and energy security across these winter storms that we've had. If it hadn't been for nuclear power, and it hadn't been for coal power, this country would have looked like a third world nation over the last 3 winters. We're that close in our generation capacity and the nation's grid reliability that we're on the precipice of running off a cliff. So this is, we're looking at 15 to 20 years, I think, before we're going to get a nuclear power plant sited in Kentucky, maybe even get a new one built. I think some of the utilities are very optimistic about their projections when that new nuclear reactor can come online. But if we don't do this, we're going to run off a cliff, because the 80s vintage coal plants are going to retire in 2040. And we're already at a point where we're looking at 30 to 50 megawatts of new load just in PJM over the next decade. Then a loss of net generation during that period of time, not a gain in net generation, but a loss of net generation capacity to support that load, that level of load. So this is a national security issue too, long term. So yes, it's going to be an expensive endeavor, but we have to do it. There's just no alternative. We have to think also about the sustainability aspect of our generation fleet going forward. And if we really want to do a meaningful reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, we can't do it any other way. Battery storage isn't going to carry the day when it comes to reliability and energy security and resiliency. And solar is not going to carry the way. Wind is not. It takes everything. It takes inertia. It takes assets that produce steam, drive turbines that create the inertia to support 60 hertz so we can keep the lights on. So this is, you can see I'm a little bit passionate about nuclear power. And not because I have worked in, I just don't see another alternative. We've got to do something. So give us a way to make quick cost recovery, and that'll help out greatly. We can't afford to carry the cost of this endeavor over a year in between rate cases. It's just like I said earlier, it starts with millions, it rapidly hits tens of millions, it rapidly hits hundreds of millions, and it rapidly exceeds billions. So that's what we're dealing with here. This isn't like another, this is a whole new paradigm shift for Kentucky, the way we think about siting and constructing and paying for our energy resiliency in our future.
And so when we talk about, I think as Mr. Kinlock talked about, I don't know the exact phrase you used, but I think they said everything was over budget and underperformed. That's the nuclear. Is that close enough?
Close enough.
Okay, all right. Forget about the underperformance, but everything being over budget. Obviously, I think that what's in everybody's minds when they talk about the cost or the Vodal units in Georgia, the AP 1000s that they built, which came in, and every time I say the number of how many billions it was over, it gets inflated in my head. So let's just say it was billions over. Besides that, I mean, what other reference is there? Instead of going back to the 80s on the price of nuclear plants, besides the Vodal units, are there other comps, for lack of a better word, to say this is why they're always coming in over budget and late? We do many things at the Public Service Commission, so I haven't had an opportunity to look at all the other units, but I know that the Vodal is the most recent one. Are there other comps?
Not nuclear comps. Probably the next thing on the same financial scale may be an LNG facility, which is also in the billions. I guess I would offer, well, you bring up Vogel, and yes, it went much longer, and it was much more expensive But to Mr. Mosier's point, Georgia is certainly glad they have them right now. And there is a no regret on those two units, Vogtle 3 and 4. And just when we think about new nuclear, I think what we have to figure out is how to take credit for the other intangibles that come with it, the energy density. If coal is not going to be a viable option going forward, and we have hyperscaler customers that aren't even satisfied with gas, they are only as a bridging option, then what other form of large dispatchable power do you have? And energy security, knowing that the fuel, 18 months of fuel is contained in the vessel. It doesn't matter if the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. It doesn't matter if a river is high or too low for transport. It doesn't matter if you're in the middle of a polar vortex and gas is being sent to home heating instead of power plants. And then you have the environmental attributes that come with it. So I think at some point all of that is going to have to be fairly valued.
I think one thing that the new reactor designs today are a game changer. And the reason I say that is that every utility that built a nuclear power plant back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, their choice was either a PWR or a boiling water reactor. And that would have been fine. Okay, the 80% turned out to be PWRs, 20% turned out to be BWRs, but they had to change. Every utility had customization across the entire supply chain choices. It had a different balance of a plant equipment. It had all kinds of design changes that occurred during that time. We had a regulatory environment that was learning. The NRC was learning, and it was very reactive, and that contributed greatly to cost. I think we've overcome all of that today. So I think the high degree of customization and the mistakes made in the design and engineering construction process back in the 80s is we've learned that lesson.
Yeah.
So I think it's not going to be cheap, but I think you're not going to see the level of uncertainty, I guess, in cost.
And with that customization, if I may add on to your point, that customization obviously drives up costs, because then you can't move forward the project and the construction lessons learned to the next project. There isn't going to be a single small modular reactor technology that is selected. There are going to be multiple technologies that move forward, but it is going to be important, and it's something that we have learned as an industry, is that if we go with a specific SMR design, whether it's AEP building it, or Duke, or Dominion, or NextEra, that we keep that design the same. So there is standardization, and then we will do what we do best as a nuclear industry, and that is to openly share our lessons learned, so that we can get from that first of a kind cost down to something more reasonable and nth of a kind cost. That standardization is key.
Yeah. I invoke Mr. Kinlock's name, and he would like to speak, and then I'll get to you, Kenya. Thank you all for your comments. I appreciate that.
Your question was whether we have any cost figures, and we do. There was a project that was attempted in Utah by the Utah Associated Municipal Power System that was eventually canceled in, I believe it was 2021. This was a SMR, a small modular reactor design, and after the cost, this is before they even built the thing, the cost tripled from about $3 billion up to $9.3 billion. The size of the reactor was also reduced, so it's probably about 4 times, and they never actually built it. They had to cancel it because of the cost. So there is your modern cost numbers with respect to the SMRs that are being promoted here. It's the same situation. It's all theoretical. It works great and everything until it comes into the real world. I mean, that's why I went into nuclear engineering, because it's on paper it is great, but in reality, the real numbers are a whole different world. And I just have to also react to one thing you talked about. Nuclear power is not dispatchable. It is base load that is constant all the time. And that's why there have been so many pump storage hydro facilities built to take the power during the nighttime on Sunday and pump it up, because it can't be dispatched. And as you well know, there are times that the actual spot market prices go negative because of nuclear power on the system that can't be dispatched. It's just like other renewables that can't be dispatched. It can't be dispatched.
Right. Thank you. Ms. Dunn.
Thank you. Just to provide some information for the record regarding cost of advanced nuclear, Idaho National Laboratory has a meta-analysis of advanced nuclear reactor cost estimates. I would like to also mention that for this conversation, there are a lot of terms that have been discussed today: advanced nuclear, SMR. There are some nuances there relating to cost and technology. Advanced nuclear is encompassing of large reactors such as the Vogtle units. The AP1000s are considered advanced nuclear compared to the fleet that was built in the 80s. But then also within the other advanced reactor space, you have, Generation 3 and Gen 4. Gen 4 reactors are those that are right now unproven. We don't have any operational. They do things differently in terms of cooling technology. We do have SMRs built on proven technology. The Westinghouse AP300, GE Vernovas, the BWRX. Those are built on just smaller scales of larger technologies that we know how to operate. So I do think we have to be very careful when talking about costs and when we look at technologies, because advanced nuclear encompasses large, small, micro, but also the Gen 4s, which we're all waiting to see, and new scales in there with UAMPS, TerraPower, X-Energy, Kairos. Those are all new reactor technologies unproven. We have some existing developers with Westinghouse and GE that I believe would bring a different perspective on that. So I would caution the commission that have to be careful in the terminology and be specific, because that we can't lump everything together, is I guess where I'm getting at. Also, Mr. Mosier's comments, if we are to drive down costs in the future, most reactor developers today are even working together to ensure that components are standardized so that we do not have a fleet that is so customized and specific that you can't service it into the future, but also to the point that it's so expensive because it's so customizable. To drive down costs, we have to have commercial scale book orders, manufacturing operations, and standardization of design. I will say this again, Kentucky is in a very good position to have enough runway to evaluate the test cases that are playing out today, but then also being able to evaluate what types of technologies will work for Kentucky's infrastructure and assets that we have here. And also learn from Vogtle. Vogtle was a first-of-a-kind build. We all now realize that. There were a lot of mistakes made that resulted in cost overruns. I think Kentucky's in a position to ensure that we have the appropriate guardrails in place to contain those types of instances that we saw with Vogtle. Vogtle did not have an approved construction design. The workforce was unprepared, and not to mention the work orders and how those were being delivered on site. So there's quite a few lessons learned. I would encourage the commission to maybe talk to the Vogtle Commission, talk to Southern around what were the lessons learned from that. If we were to build Vogtle today, we would have an entirely different perspective, as well as preparations in order to ensure that those costs were more appropriately contained. I do agree with some other comments. We have yet to see one come on budget and on time. But Kentucky is not we're not a first of a kind state, nor do we want to be a first of a kind state. We have the luxury of time and a generation fleet that will give us time in order to evaluate, have appropriate regulatory constructs in place to mitigate cost overruns. But I will say it will take the state working in partnership with the federal government to ensure that we have appropriate federal oversight. We have an NRC that is funded and staffed, and that the federal government acknowledges that nuclear is a United States energy security issue, and therefore they have a role to play in the development of it nationwide as well. Cost, I think right now we just have to ensure that we're watching what's happening with TVA at Clinch River. And more importantly, this is an international issue. We have international builds and costs going on faster than we are. And we have to keep track of the builds in other countries and how those are progressing, as well as issues that we see there as well. So one thing missing from today is a developer perspective. And when I mean developer, I mean a new advanced reactor developer other than utilities. At some point, I'd recommend that the commission have a conversation with the advanced reactor developers around costs. I don't know what that's going to look like, but their voices are not present today, and they're the ones developing the new reactors, as well as having Westinghouse and GE's presence as two of the most major nuclear companies building reactors today. That's all I have, Jeb.
All right, thank you. Senator Carroll, do you have anything that you'd like to say?
Kenya just touched on what I was going to add, and that's the international aspect of this. And we can learn from other countries. There are countries moving much faster than we are that they don't have the regulatory issues that we have. I had the opportunity to visit Ontario, Canada last summer. I got to visit the site where they had broken ground for their SMR, which is the same model that will be going in down in Tennessee. And globally, there is a lot of cooperation going on right now with these developers, and we'll learn from that. And that's not what America's about. The pessimistic view that this can't happen, this is not going to work, folks, it's got to happen. There's no can't. It's got to happen. We're going to need the energy. This is the way to do it. And make no mistake, I've traveled enough throughout this country to know the states are on board with this, and the states are moving forward, almost without exception. There are a few outliers, but globally, the technology is advancing in other countries that we will be able to learn from. The cost will come down. The Generation 4 reactors are so much further advanced. Those will be perfected. I think I've seen and heard enough from experts to know that I'm comfortable with where we're headed, and with knowing that the safety of these reactors, with the spent fuel issues, with the recycling and repurposing, I think all that technology is going to keep advancing, and we're going to come through this. I think there are some estimates predictions that maybe by 2045, 300 reactors would be needed to power this country. And I mean, you all have seen it in our state. You've seen what happens when we have really cold weather. The blackouts, the brownouts, that's not things that are coming in the future if we don't do something. It's here now. And we have to react to that, and we have to push forward. and keep a global initiative as we learn and making sure that we're building relationships as a state with these countries that are maybe a little further advanced in some areas and with some of the developers. But, you know, for several years now, I've spoken with people all over the country and outside of the country, and we can do this. We can overcome the cost. It's going to come down. The previous administration in D.C. was pushing the issue. The current administration is. And when this country sets its mind to do something, we can get it done. And I hope that that's the attitude that we go forward with, and that the pessimism dies off, because there's so much at stake with this. Not, you know, just the national security issues, but our economy, you name it. And that's why I have become so passionate. I'm not a science geek. I'm a retired police officer, and I ran a nonprofit. My passion comes from the history involved in all of this. We are witnessing historical times in our world right now when it comes to energy. And to be a part of that and to see that move forward, that's where my passion comes from with this. And I don't get passionate about a lot of things, but every day I learn something new about this, and I take the time to learn more. And our kids' futures are at stake through this, and the foundation that we lay in this state today is what's going to affect. We were just talking, we both have our first grandkids that were recently born. That's what this is all about, and we've got to get that foundation laid. And there is no can't about this. We can do it. Our history shows that we can do it. The science is there, the research is there, and with the increased initiatives, with the money that is being poured into these initiatives, we can get there. It can be done. That's my pulpit speech. My question is, with the co-ops and the privately owned utilities, as a legislature, are there things that we need to address as we go forward to help level that playing field? You all help me understand that. I'm still learning a lot more from that perspective. Can anybody help me understand that better? Is there anything major that policy-wise we need to address to level that playing field?
Senator, are you asking between the states or between the IREs and the co-ops?
Yeah, the investor-owned and the co-ops is, for that field to be a level playing field for both of you all to be able to move forward in this arena, are there policy issues at a state level that we need to address? Hope I'm making it
Yeah,
clear.
I think so. I mean, I think we've talked about it, and Noel talked about the legislative actions in Virginia, in Indiana that help with some cost recovery, and then happens a little quicker with the guardrails, obviously. But that sort of stuff is.
So that would be consistent for the two different types of utilities.
Yeah, I would agree. I think whatever, I would not parse or put a wall or differentiate us how we're looking at nuclear power. Both of our abilities come down to the fact that we have to be able to sell that electricity and give recovery from our customers to be able to pay for those investments. So anything we do to make sure we have a healthy, in our case, 16-member cooperatives that own East Kentucky Power can pay their bills. So that'll take state help and federal help, I think, in the long run to make this happen. Whatever's good, step back. I don't believe that a Kentucky cooperative, or maybe even a pair of Kentucky cooperatives, are going to step into singular ownership of a nuclear power plant. I see us as the most likely to be a minority partner with a larger investor-owned utility that already has existing infrastructure. I'd love to see Palisades be reinvented as a nuclear site by TVA. So to the extent that you make it easier, just keep it simple, make it easier for the investor-owned utilities to accomplish the task of building a nuclear plant, many nuclear plants, will be beneficial to us, clearly. But they have the security that's necessary, they got the funding that's necessary, and the ability to withstand maybe longer lag periods between expenditures and recovery. So I guess it's a complex way of saying, I think whatever you do for both of us is going to be beneficial. I wouldn't differentiate us in our needs.
Yeah, if I can speak to that. Don Gully, CEO of Big Rivers Electric, and we serve 3 member owners. And really, it is a level of risk. If you, in terms of capital, if you think about Big Rivers, we're a $1.7 billion company. And the conversations that we are talking about here in terms of nuclear development, we are talking in the multiple billions. And I agree with Mr. Mosier that in terms of scale, we would not have the scale to do a single project. We would be working toward partners consortium. But like IOUs, we also, in terms of our borrowing capabilities, we also report and are rated by the rating agencies. And so the viability of our companies to borrow money is dictated by our ratings. And our member owners pay for every dollar that we spend. We don't have the distinction between a shareholder or and customer at all. Everything we do is at the risk and comes through the member owners. But I don't think there's enough there to distinguish us in order to move this ball forward. And this is a process. We're not going to wake up and all of a sudden it's 2050. We have to take one step forward at a time. This is a great first step to move Kentucky to a truly all of the above strategy. And I think it's a matter of risk and scale is what differentiates us. But from the process and wanting to move forward, there is no distinction between the two.
We don't have the capability to build that internal expertise. It's just be too much burden on our own members to develop that separate nuclear entity basically within our own organization. So there's great economies of scale for us to partner with our interest-owned utilities here in the room to make it happen for Kentucky.
Great question.
All right. Chair, Commissioner Wood, do you have any comments or questions?
On that topic, or we move?
Oh, this is your commission. Okay. Do you have anything? So, I mean, I guess that we already kind of touched on cost sharing, partnering with other utilities, so we probably don't need necessarily to talk about that. But I do have a question going back to, you talked about there is a nuclear generation merchant fleet. But was it built as a merchant fleet, or was it a result of restructuring in states, or a little bit of both?
I believe the latter. Yeah, there has not been a merchant nuclear plant built.
Okay, I mean, a merchant fleet exists, but it was built
correct
by vertically integrated utilities and
yes.
restructuring. So I think your parent corporation, PPL, had some, and AEP, I guess.
No.
Okay, all right. Couldn't remember how these things came about, but it's one of those things. All right. I think we talked about a public-private partnership, but when we talk about that, I don't know if we set it up as public utility and privately, investor-owned or capital. But what are some of the different maybe cost-sharing or ownership opportunities? If we haven't discussed anything yet, is there anything else we haven't covered on this topic? I'm going to start with Mr. Moser. Like, are there other types of ownership models that we haven't discussed today?
None come to mind.
Okay.
None come to mind. I don't want to make that aspect of this overly complex for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, Shane mentioned that there's some delivery structures out there, but I don't think those are proprietary information that we don't want to share at this point. If something came to and we came to the commission, obviously we'd have to explain it then, but right now that's not something.
That's fine. I understand that we talked about models. Ms. Ernstberger?
No comments from Harrison.
This is a very interesting topic about public and private partnerships and what happens when you combine those missions, so to speak. and I'm taking this as being, anytime you get in a partnership, does it have any impact or any exposure? How does it change the notion of one of those participants going, how does one of those participants going into bankruptcy change the exposure? What are the risks associated with that? Or how does it reduce it or increase it? And I think that's one of the things that when you get into partnerships, it's the process through which you look at and examine the role that each partner is going to play, and are you increasing or decreasing risk through having the partnership? Thank you.
And I think that those are valid questions for that. Mr. DeCenzo.
Nothing further.
And Algenia KU, nothing for the, I guess it was the 3P is what we call about the public-private partnerships. I think the Kentucky Wired might be one such structure. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
On that topic, again, I think we have to be careful about the use of public-private partnership because it has different meanings and different conversations. I think in the context of a delivery model for nuclear, there are documented different types of business models, which you can reference in the, well, if you can access the DOE previous commercial liftoff report, gave various examples of business deployment models by which private entities and utilities could have numerous types of arrangements in order to facilitate the deployment of a reactor. So I think that's one way we think about this general term, public-private partnership. I think it's a very different conversation if you look at a P3 as codified in statute, where we utilize a P3 for public infrastructure projects. To my knowledge, I don't think we have nationwide, we have ever seen the P3 model as meant for public infrastructure deployment be utilized for a nuclear project. Does that mean that it's not possible under the P3 statutes that we have and authorizations? I don't know what that would look like, Jeb, but just clarifying that public-private partnership has different definitions based on what we're talking about. And for a true P3 to work, the nuclear plant would have to be considered public infrastructure. And I think that's a conversation we have yet to have.
I'll bring it back from public ownership of generating resources. I don't think we want to, that wasn't on the bingo card today.
No, but we say public-private partnership, so I just need to be clear, we're talking about a different public-private partnership with nuclear, not a P3 public infrastructure project, although that would be an interesting conversation.
We can have that at a different time. I'm trying to get us out by 1 o'clock so we don't have to take a break. Yes, Chair.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, the Kentucky Nuclear Energy Development Authority currently has $8 million to give out in grants, and we've just finished the application to be able to award that money. But Senator Carroll, I know there's been a lot of talk of, some additional money being added, and I won't ask you to talk very much details, but I would like to know, like, some ideas that folks have for ways that money could be used. What the legislature, what parameters they set on it, of course, will have a lot to do with that. And I guess K and EDA may be giving it out and we'll have parameters. But, I mean, is that money potentially for development and for investment in a partnership? I don't know. If you wanted to talk about it, and if folks here had ideas of how, if there was a pot of money to start talking about development. Texas put in, what, $300 million?
Let's not bring up Texas.
Okay, but other states have put in quite a bit of money. Our $10 million was a start. $2 million went to the community college in Paducah for some workforce training, and then $8 million is going to go out in grants just to get people started. But I don't know. I'd like to talk about the potential for a little bit of state money being put in and how we could use it. And Senator Carroll, whatever you'd like to say about it.
We had asked for $50 million when we passed the bill, and it to be distributed through NEDA for various projects that are in the bill, and then also some for the Public Service Commission to do what you all are doing. And then also grant funding. But I don't know that there are really, I mean, the whole idea of the approach that we're using as a state is the nuclear ecosystem, and to make sure that we have funding available for all aspects of nuclear, not just to build a reactor, but like what's going on in Paducah with the waste that are there. We talk a lot about waste, thousands of barrels of waste from the gaseous diffusion plant that are going to be enriched and will be utilized as fuel for the current fleet primarily, but also other type of fuel. So the $2 million of that 10 was used for the University of Kentucky School of Engineering in Paducah to develop a photonics program, which would be utilized by the GLE, who uses the laser technology to enrich uranium. So that's money that was used that will go to them. So I think it's a pretty broad scope on what the money will be used for. And there have been additional conversations within our caucus on how we want to invest, and will we continue to invest money through NEDA, or we talked about the possibility of setting aside funding within the Budget Reserve Trust Fund, that, you know, if there's something that comes up where it's needed, that it can be pulled out that way. We talked about the possibility of putting up funding for the early site development, the $70 million, to help, you know, if someone is stepping up to start that process, to help out in that area. So it's really, in general, it's still all coming together because we have gone from 0 to 100 miles an hour, it seems, overnight. And so the support is there that's never been there before, and how we're going to structure that, I think, is perhaps still up in the air, but with a general understanding that it's about trying to take advantage of all aspects of nuclear energy, not just building reactors. But if we can land a facility here that builds parts, that's what we want to do. So that's been the focus. So Angie, to answer your question, I don't think there are any real set restrictions on that. The authority board will make the final decisions on how that $10 million is used, and it is my hope that through the next budget that we'll make a significant investment. I think the support is there to do that at this point, and Kentucky is developing a reputation throughout the country. There's nowhere that I go that they don't talk about what we're doing in Kentucky and with Kenya's efforts, with what the Public Service Commission is doing. We may not be on the forefront of having reactors here, but as far as movement in the nuclear field in that area, getting prepared, we're showing ourselves as a top tier state in those areas. But we've got to, the next step has got to be to make a more significant investment as a state, and it's my hope that we will do that. I don't know what that format will be. Don't really care. As long as it's there, we can take advantage of it, and we can help build a future, a broad future when it comes to nuclear energy.
I'll say it's a little bit out of line, but since we're leaving at 1, we may have another one of these where we narrow down on some of the issues we've talked about today. I don't want to meet you guys to death. Like if these aren't, if we don't think they're useful, you know, we don't have to keep having the informal conferences. We are having the formal conference in May 12th and 13th, Ashley, I think. And it's probably going to be at the Kentucky History Center, but we're looking at a few different sites around Frankfort or Lexington, and we're narrowing down the people we want to invite from all over the country, different PSC commissions across the state who are already regulating nuclear, industry folks, environmental folks, people to talk about waste, and we're going to have the more formal technical conference in May. We're also gonna do public comment hearings across the state, definitely in Paducah. I think the other sites we've identified are Louisville, Lexington, Bowling Green, Hazard, and Covington. But I'm open to suggestions if somebody has a different site that, or an area that might screen well for nuclear, that we need to go ahead and start talking to the folks there and see what the issues are, to either help select that site or help eliminate that site if folks don't want it and are very much against it. The public comment hearings are probably going to start, I don't know if we've set dates yet. They're February through April. Did we set dates?
I don't know if we set these for the public comments. I did confirm that's May 12th and 13th.
Okay, May 12th and 13th for the technical conference. If you guys want to go ahead and mark that off, we really hope that you'll participate. We'll probably call some of you to be on some of those panels, so we can flesh out like what's working in other states and what we can learn from. And then these public comment hearings, certainly we have not set agendas yet or anything like that, and we would be interested in your ideas the next time we get together about what we need to make sure and discuss, so that, you know, folks are really educated about the potential for jobs in ancillary industries, or, you know, jobs at nuclear plants, as well as what the risks are and potential for, you know, ratepayers experiencing negative effects. So if you guys have ideas, we would really like to hear them maybe the next time we gather.
If I may, I'd like to go back to the first part of your question, and how can that money be utilized? The reasonable first step for us would be site characterization, or any company.
Screening?
Well,
Site?
so the very first part, so the 70 million is representative of what it would take to get an approved construction early site permit. That includes the 18 months to prepare the application, and then the 18 months to 2 years, the fees for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to approve it. But the money that you're talking about could advance that substantially. The first thing you do when you go into a property is you have to start evaluating all of the ologies, the seismology, the hydrology, the metrology. So that money could be used to fund the geotechnical borings that have to be done. It could be used to fund the monitoring wells that have to be installed, or it could be used to put up the meteorological tower. And those monitoring wells and meteorological tower, based on the regulation right now, we need 2 years worth of data for the site. So again, moving the football forward a little bit, that funding would certainly help with that.
And we talked about early cost recovery. If 35 million of the 70 came from a state grant, then the ratepayers would be looking more like 35 million than 70 at the early site prep. And maybe if 2 utilities were sharing in that and partnering, then that's even less of a burden on ratepayers. So, I mean, I like it that this doesn't feel real competitive today. It feels more collaborative, and maybe that's where we're headed, at spreading those risks out.
Sure.
Okay, sorry. You know, we have about half an hour left, and so this might be a decent point. The chair hadn't talked about having another informal conference. I don't think we covered everything that we necessarily need to in this one. So, in my opinion, which is not backed up by the order of the commission at this time, I think maybe another informal conference would perhaps be beneficial. And so what I'd like to do is ask for other topics that have not been covered that we could cover at a second informal conference. These are some of the things that I was thinking about. One are going to be a deeper dive into waste and waste storage issues. We've kind of talked about that, but we didn't talk about it in any sort of detail, and what, if anything, that the commission can do, or take a look at other state entities that could have an impact on that. We touched on different technologies. Kenya was very helpful with that, but maybe we could have a more developed discussion about, you know, next gen, current generation of nuclear technologies. I think any generation conversation is probably only a portion of the conversation when you're talking about you have to get that electricity to other people, and it means going to require transmission upgrades. with regard in how, if we're taking a holistic approach, we also have to look at transmission as well, and the cost allocation of that. Grid integration, reliability, I think we touched on public engagement, but these are all different things that I think we can talk about, even security concerns. Are there other topics that people would like to be raised and discussed at another informal conference? I'm going to start, I probably have to start somewhere, so Mr. Spinar, do you have any ideas on the topic?
Well, first, thank you for having us today and letting us talk about all the things we've already talked about. We did submit a statement of issues, and I'm not going to rehash all of them. One of the things that, from a topic standpoint, and this is what we see take place at this commission and what we see take place at the siting board, is that community acceptance. That's been something that's talked about somewhat today, community acceptance, and I think that might be a good area to identify for additional discussion, because although there are a lot of people, for example, who like pipelines, locate pipelines somewhere, and you find out that there are some people who don't like them. All the people who like solar panels and the notion of solar renewable energy then go out and try to locate a solar field. And so my suggestion is, respectfully, one of the things to do a little bit deeper dive into is the process of assessing community interest and the process of just basically setting out and start defining how do we take community concerns into the process and what's required federally and what it may not necessarily be a requirement, a mandate, but what would also be advisable for utilities to engage in, because that's some of these things, they look good on paper, and then go out and try to locate one, and you find that it's some people have very strong feelings about it that don't emerge until you actually begin to put the plan into operation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ernst-Berker?
Yes, thank you. Some of the other topics we would welcome discussions on would be decommissioning. Don't think we talked about that today. Also, some of the, in terms of decommissioning, the financial risks associated to ratepayers during the decommissioning of nuclear facilities. And then some other issues would be the life cycle in terms of environmental risks and safety for the communities, and something that might be of community concern. Also, the life cycle of workplace safety for those who are being trained to be in these facilities. In addition, you mentioned security issues, but just wanted to say that we'd be interested in talking about vulnerability of nuclear facilities or permanent storage locations for nuclear waste or spent nuclear materials, and also the risk of those materials being weaponized domestically. That's all I have at the moment. But we also submitted an issue statement as well, and have a few other things listed on the issue statement.
Okay, we'll make sure to take a look at that, and we'll develop an agenda over the next conference. Thank you, Power.
I think you covered it for us, I think.
Okay. LGNKU?
Just get the KPC again.
Did I say it again?
I'm sitting here about to jump
I drive
on.
by your all's headquarters twice a day, so I should know. Anyway.
I think as far as attendees, I think it would be appropriate and wise to have some representative from the NRC come to the state and can answer some of the questions we have around storage and security and so forth, and how they approach that from a regulatory
Definitely at the
perspective.
technical conference, we plan to invite them, and maybe we can get them sooner.
We haven't talked much about resiliency, and it's not quite a bad word yet, but sustainability is still in our mantra. And we're doing everything we can to to make a transition to lower our greenhouse gas emissions. And I think this is a vital conversation to have, whether that should be a part of the IRP process as well as one of the qualitative aspects of it.
All right, and I've neglected to call on Big Rivers most of the time, but Don, do you have anything?
We're good.
Okay, all right. Attorney General? Okay. Senator Carroll, do you have anything else you'd like for us to take up?
No, I think we touched base on just about everything. The supply chain issues, I remember one particular conference, that's all they talked about. And I think there was the Energy Communities Alliance. That is a big issue, but I think it's something that will be overcome as the technologies are narrowed down, and some standardization will be built in to whatever technologies move forward. But that's an interesting concept, and that's the supply chain moves into the other issues. What are the other benefits outside of just reactors being located in our Commonwealth that brings? What are the related industries? How's it going to affect current industries within our state? As part of the big picture, and when we talk about ecosystem, that's a large part of what we're referring to is the whole gamut related to nuclear energy. So a little bit closer dive into that might be interesting, and the expertise that you can get from the nuclear NEI and GAIN, maybe having somebody online through Zoom or whatever that can answer some of the expertise related questions. And I rely on them a lot. When I have a question that's technology based or wondering, I usually call one of those two entities, and they are a tremendous asset. And thank you all for being here today. I love this discussion, and even those that are skeptical, that's needed. We do need to question this at every step of the way, and we do need to watch out for all of our people and make sure we're making good decisions. I have a tendency to get excited, and I want to move forward quickly, but this is not an area that you can necessarily do that, and it's going to be a proper balance. And a lot of expertise in this room from utilities and other areas, and it's going to take all of us to solve these problems, and it's going to take meetings like this. So Angie, again, my compliments for what you all are doing. And it's exciting times in this state and in this country and in this world with what's going on in this area. And thank you all for allowing me to be here. And thank you for your time here and your efforts and your input. Whether I agree or disagree, it's all valuable.
Thank you, Senator. And I'll turn it over to the chair. Do you want to see us out?
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
That's funny.
Okay. Yeah, thanks so much. Really, this has been a really good conversation today. I appreciated the tone of it. Appreciated multiple perspectives, and hopefully we're going to have another one fairly soon. We'll get that order out. We'll always have a virtual option because we're getting close to winter and weather may become an issue. All right, thanks everybody. Safe trip on home.